Kia ora everyone, welcome along to tonight's presentation. I'm going to be taking you through a bit of a deep dive with running data, transforming numbers into results. So I'm going to be looking at a number of sessions. I've spoken to a few people whose data is being displayed, and they've given me permission kindly to share their data and the benefit of us all. So there's a few key things I look at when I analyze your training data. Compliance of the training is the key thing I'm looking at, trying to optimize your results. The presentation today, I'm going to look at some steady runs and then some interval higher intensity runs and also some time trials. So firstly, why do the session as planned? Now, every session has a purpose. I've planned that session for a reason. Predominantly, level 2 workouts are going to be trying to improve the efficiency of your aerobic metabolism. We are endurance athletes after all. We are trying to improve our endurance. We get our endurance through the burning of both fat and carbohydrates in the presence of oxygen to generate or to transform energy into a usable format. However, we all will benefit from doing some form of speed work, and depending on what event we're training for and what duration that event is or events, you're likely to have a range of different intensities. Level 3 through to 5, providing a range of different performance benefits, from continuing to improve the aerobic metabolism with the presence of lactic acid, through to building resilience and tolerance to lactic acid, as well as enhancing clearing that lactic acid at level 3. And level 5, we're trying to increase our VO2 max and further tolerance and clearance of lactic acid, depending on the structure of those workouts. Time trials. Now, most people think I put time trials into your workouts just to be mean and cruel. I actually put them there for the physiological benefits first and foremost, but they're also a great gauge of your improvement or lack of improvement if that's the case. But it doesn't always appear that way when you first glance at it and think, oh, I haven't improved. But there are other things going on that mean that you have improved, just not the time may not have improved. So let's have a look at a steady state session. Here is a great example of a workout from Jess, 2-hour long run measured with power. And looking at that pink line, you can see how it sits in that slightly different shaded area pretty much the entire run. And we'll have a look at that in a bit more detail shortly. But a steady state session doesn't always need to be at level 2. Sometimes I do include them at level 3 or level 4, and we'll cover off an example of that shortly. Let's have a look at that session in detail. So here's Jess's session here. You can see it was a full 2 hours. She covered 25 odd kilometers in that run. Her variability index was 1.0. She hardly changed intensity at all throughout that run. Apart from the scheduled stride outs that she did at, I think it was 40, 45, no, it must have been, looks like it's a little bit after 35, but 35, 40, an hour 45 and an hour 50 through the workout. Now, if we slide on down and look at her time she spent in her respective power zones, at level 2, she spent 89% of her run building her aerobic engine. And Jess has been extremely consistent with her long runs, actually most of her sessions for the last few years, very consistent. Hence the reason she's built such a significant aerobic engine, and she can run comfortably for 25 Ks in a 2-hour run. That's probably the key thing I'd look at a long run like this. She did have a wee break. I'm not sure if it was stop stretching break or something else. Stopped and saw a friend, spoke to them for a short amount of time and then carried on. But you can also see the stride outs, these nice wee peaks. She nailed them as well. Jumping back over. Here's an example of a steady state run at level 4. So this is Garmin's recommended threshold run number 4, 10-minute warm-up, 21 minutes at threshold, and then 10 minutes cool down at level 2. And this is one of my examples. And you can see the warm-up was pretty much in the zone. The 21 minutes, thereabouts, not exactly precise, not exactly perfect. But then you can also see how Friday was at the end. It had a cheeky little walk here at the start of the cool down and then never really hit level 2 during the cool down. So let's have a look at that one in a bit more detail. So looking at this one, we can break that down and you can see I spent a bit of time in the various zones. Now, 10-minute warm-up, 10-minute cool down, I should have spent 20 minutes at level 2. And you can see I only spent 8 minutes 19. 21 minutes I should have spent at level 4. And just by glancing at that, you can see I spent the bulk of the time at level 3. And I did spend 9 minutes, 9 out of that 21 minutes at level 4. Coming down here, we can select, or we can highlight the portion I should have spent at level 4. And we'll see the normalized power for that was 349. Should have been 350 and slightly above. So I just dipped below there. That's probably the key piece of data that I'd be looking at for that. So I gave it a good solid crack, and I can assure you that I wasn't taking this run easy. See my heart rate slowly building progressively throughout. Within that, and based on the fact that I had to take a walk as soon as I finished, I was pushing my capabilities through that. If we have a look at the pace in there as well, normalized graded pace, 4 minutes 54 per kilometre. Now that takes into account the terrain, and I'll just put that in. And you can see there's some undulations to start with, and then generally trending downhill. So it was giving me an advantage. So overall, might give this workout a 2 or a 3 out of 10 for precision with it. So having a look at interval runs, there's a lot more variety within interval runs, and there's greater thing or more things for me to look at to analyze. I typically ignore the warm up and cool down unless the athlete has gone totally wrong with that and is at the massively wrong intensity. Key things for me that I do analyze are the intervals and the rest intervals. Things I'm looking at, were they done at the correct intensity, or similar to my session I showed there, was that a little bit off? Was their intensity maintained for the duration, or did the intensity drop in later repetitions? That could indicate a number of things. Level of fatigue. It can also indicate that they were too intense to start with. Now, I didn't dive back far enough to find a good example of that where someone starts too intensely, misses the target intensity by going too hard, and then struggles to maintain it for the final few reps, which at the end of the day, a workout like that has missed the boat totally, and you'd be looking at a 0. So no examples of that in recent times from any of you, so that's a good thing. Was there planned variety in the intensity? If so, was that conducted as prescribed? And I'll show you an example of that from today, actually. And what was the effective terrain? We had a look at the terrain in that last example, slightly downhill, which would have made things a little bit easier if that session was based on pace as opposed to power, which it was. So here is my run from today, Gareth's progressive run. And you can see two examples of it, one from Training Peaks, one from Training Tilt. So some of you utilize Training Tilt, others are utilizing Training Peaks. So showing you how that data is displayed. Now this workout is a challenging workout to hit, especially out in the real world as opposed to on a treadmill, and more so with power base rather than pace. Now, if we look at it down in Training Tilt, and I'll show you that live on the website shortly, but you can see every few minutes the pace is increasing. And if we look at it, there's all these short 1 minute intervals where we're increasing the pace. After the warm-up, we spend 1 minute at level 3 minus, 4 minutes at level 2. A minute at level 3, 4 minutes at level 2. A minute at level 3 plus, 4 minutes, and so on. We're just slowly building that intensity of that 1 minute into the very last one where we're giving it absolutely everything. Interesting thing to note is early on in the workout, the power tends to be a lot more stoic, up and down, a lot more variability, but tends to be a lot more stable towards the end of the workout, which, and once again, sneaky wee walk at the start of my cool down, and although I did a better job of lifting it into the correct intensity to finish with, still not far from a perfect workout. When we're looking at the heart rate, we can see every few minutes it climbs a little bit, recovers, climbs a little bit higher, recovers, climbs a little bit higher, recovers until we get into the cool down. Power, you can see these discrete points or peaks, but also we're looking at the same data from up here, just displayed differently. We can see the warm-up was pretty good, and then we can see the power dropping away in some of these rest intervals where it was a little bit lower. And I'll show you the effect of elevation in that shortly. And once again, the pace, you can see these discrete points where I've increased the effort. Now, some of those paces, that one there, I'm pretty certain was going uphill. So my pace was actually slower, but when you look at the effort was right where it was supposed to be, even though it was a decrease in pace. So let's have a look at that. So here it is here, and I'll chuck that elevation in, and yeah, so you can see it starts pointing upwards. It's not a massively steep hill, but right at that point there, when I started my 1 minute effort, it was just at the base of one incline and the start of another. So my pace dropped. If we add pace in there, we start getting a crowded display. Let's see. So we can see that that pace is significantly lower as a result of the hill climb through there. And we can even have a look and see it's not long enough to get a good gauge for the gradient. Sorry. And so we can see what sort of gradient that was. A workout like this where the intensity is different for each interval, it's hard to get a good gauge on how long should have been spent in each zone, but it should have been roughly 3 minutes at tempo, 3 minutes at threshold, and then spread 3 minutes at zone 5, and then a minute above that. So there's a bit of variability there. When we look at that in Training Tilt, we could get the breakdown. Actually, this one might actually give us the altitude gain on whatever one that was. It would have been that one there. No, doesn't. Once again, too short. The training tilt breaks it down, shows you all the metrics in one place, as well as giving you nice clear graphs without having to make any adjustments to the settings. These are also available in Training Peaks, where you're looking at your peak power sustained for a duration. 421 watts was my peak power for the 1 minute. But when you extend that over a full hour, I was 311 watts, which is pretty much right where it would normally be for a long run. So overall, not too bad. Give that one maybe a 5 or 6 out of 10. A bigger improvement from the other run we just looked at. So here is an example of a interval workout, 3 by 6 minutes at threshold or level 5 with a 2-minute rest interval in between. You can see how there's a significant step up from the warm-up up to that level 5, drop down for the rest interval, back up again, drop down, back up, drop down, and they absolutely nailed it through the cool down, unlike the examples from my training. Heart rate, this person, I'm pretty certain it was one of yours, Jess. Their heart rate is nice and steady, nice and constant the whole duration, with a small dip when they enter their rest period. Let's have a look at that in a bit more detail on Training Peaks. Here it is here. So we can break this down and look at each individual rep. So this first rep here, 6 minutes long, 100 kilojoules of work. Their normalized power was 277 and their normalized pace was 358. Now the normalized pace, that just takes out any elevation. So if it's downhill, it'll give you a slower pace than what you actually run. Let's have a look at the average pace. Pretty much flat. So 3 meters elevation gain, 3 meters loss. So the normalized pace is the same as the graded. When we come down and look at level 4, they should have been between 253 and 278 watts, 1 watt out from the peak of that. So that's good. Looking at the next interval, once again, 279, 1 watt above, so slightly high. And then the third rep, looking at that, 277, so right where they needed to be. So Jess was pushing the top end of each rep and was holding it consistently. She only had a few watts difference between. And when you look at the pace, it got quicker each rep. So 358, 354, and then 351. So almost a perfect session on that regard. Let's have a look at the warm-up. 226, which is basically slap bang in the middle of their level 2, and 230, which is still within level 2. Give that one 9.5, 10 for it. The rest intervals want you to be fresh and recovered so you can hit these. So I'm not too phased that it's a little bit low for each of them. I'm just trying to line that up a little bit better. As you can see, sliding it from 1, it hasn't aligned perfectly, but that's all good. So great session there from Jess. Relatively flat run through that workout. Looking at another session. Now this one was done on a treadmill, and I'll come back to treadmills a little bit later on. So 4 by 5 minute threshold runs, very similar session to the one Jess had done. 4 reps, same intensity. And you can see how and I'm pretty confident that the athlete did not adjust the pace during the segments where they had the intensity to run at. But treadmills are a funny beast, and I'll cover them again later. But let's just have a quick look at that workout. here it is here. So you can see they set their treadmill for the warm-up. Got their 10 minutes at an appropriate pace, 6:26. This is done by pace, so right in zone for that. Now I'm confident that they are, at the time, were familiar with what zone, what pace, what speed to set their treadmill. And there's obviously, treadmills are done kilometers per hour. The data is tracked as minutes per kilometer or minutes per mile for our North American friends. But then they've upped the intensity, and you can see that with the normalized graded pace of 6:09, which they've increased their speed. It may, and I'm confident that, because I know the person here is very numbers orientated and very detailed orientated, that they would have had their treadmill set to an appropriate intensity, but that's not being captured in the data. However, when you look at heart rate, you can see this red line tracking upwards the whole way and takes a wee dip at the end of each interval. So I can see that they are pushing the intensity, they are working hard, and that's working as it should have been, despite the fact that this data might not be, or might not be, is effectively null and void by the fact that it was on a treadmill. We can see the change in the heart rate, but the treadmill was not providing us with the most reliable data. And I'll come back to that a little bit later on. Here is a higher intensity session, Matt Fitzgerald's VO2 Progression A. So this workout here, after the warm-up, there's a series of 10 30-second intervals at level 5. The rest interval itself is level 1 to 2. We've got a wider range there to get fuller recovery. Not sure what happened after this third interval here, but power didn't go down much. But you can see the high power output. And this one, they pushed themselves and absolutely nailed or exceeded the level 5, and were able to push that and sustain that each and every rep. They got a good recovery between each interval. So we can dive into that a little bit more detail. So this is another example from Jess. It's just, this was a nice flat run again, and she was able to hit everything pretty much perfectly. There was a wee peak in the warm-up here, not sure, maybe crossing the road in front of a car or something. She gave a little bit of a spurt. We'll see the heart rate fluctuating up and down, drops down after each rep, increases with the following rep, and then drops down again when we get to the cool down. Once again, another example from Jess of a really great workout. 10 by 30 seconds is a total of 5 minutes at VO2 max. And when we look at these higher end ones, we've got 4 minutes 49 in the top end there. So that's really great to see. A really good session. What happens when it doesn't go so well? Here's an example of Jess's VO2 Progression A. Now, just because the workout's named Jess doesn't mean it is her data. It is, unlike Gareth's progressive run earlier, which was not his data. So here's a run where Jess didn't manage to hit any, well, she got in briefly there momentarily in that one, and each of the reps were missed. She was tired and fatigued, and this workout set her back. We needed to put some extra recovery in her program for her. This was nearly a year ago now. She'd had a big block of training and had some number of races, and we continued pushing the effort, but unfortunately we pushed a little bit too hard, and this workout did not go to plan. So it should have been 8 90-second reps with a good 90-second rest interval between. And as you can see, each rep was missed. And we'll dive into that in a little bit more detail. So here it is here. And if we look at each rep, so we should have been hitting 306 watts or higher and 208 watts in that rep for the normalized power, maxed at 300 in the first. Maxed at 306, normalized power, maxed at 315, maxed out at 337. So that was the one where we got a little bit of time in there. 307, 300, so below, just snuck in there momentarily. And if we look at heart rate data, it's a lot more sporadic, not getting coming down much afterwards. Once again, it's on exactly the same course, nice and flat, and you can see the heart rate was quite variable, although she did a really good job of getting it back into there for the cool down at level 2. Same with the warm-up, level 2, nice and consistent. Alrighty, here is another example of a workout that hasn't quite gone to plan this time for myself. Now this session here is basically a 30-minute smash session with a range of different intensities. Very brief warm-up. I'm never a fan of less than 10 minutes of a warm-up. It has then 10 minutes at level 3 before moving into a single rep at level 4 and then a total of 2 minutes at level 4 plus with only 30 seconds rest interval in between. Let's have a look at elevation because that had a big impact in things. I basically ran to the top of a hill, turned around and ran down. Had a little bit of a downhill undulations for these 5 minutes and thinking that this hill would help me or hold me back literally whilst trying to dial in to level 3. That didn't quite happen. And if we look at the data for those 10 minutes, normalized power was 326 watts when it should have been, or it was right at the bottom end of the zone. So that wasn't too bad, but you can see how variable it is. There was a lot of variability there, although my pace wasn't very variable because I just settled into a steady pace for those 10 minutes. You can see that is a little bit of a scoop, but a relatively flat line there. The next rep, 2 minutes rest interval, 275, which was down in level 1 when it should have been level 2. Level 4 for the next 2 minutes, 376, and was pretty much hitting that okay. Got to the top of the hill, turned and ran downhill, and you see I had to really push hard. And I think I only got lucky with the normalized power based on this peak here, filling in this gap here, and it all relatively averaging out, roughly half the time running uphill, roughly half the time downhill. Next rest interval, looking at that, it wasn't initially in the right zone, but managed to sort of rectify things for the next bit. Normalized power, 261, a little bit low, but yeah, could have been better. And then these next 4 reps, really smashed them out of the park. Level 4 plus. They're too short to get a normalized power, but we can look at the average power of 410, which puts me right up top end of level 5. Another one, 414, 396, and 409, knowing that that was my last one. able to push things a little bit hard. It's always challenging on a downhill to get that power to really high levels. Pace was really elevated, and if we look peak 400 meters, there's no way I'm running a 130 these days unless it's on a downhill for one lap of the track, and this involved 2 of the intervals and a rest interval there. Once again, looking at the heart rate, we can see how that changed. It got elevated with the 10 minutes at level 3, started descending before hitting it with the level 4, and then didn't really get much recovery in those 30-second rest intervals. And you can see it climbed back up as I climbed up a wee hill back home. So that is an example of a variable workout where there's a range of different intensities involved. Now, having a look at time trials, there's a few key things I'm looking at. How did the athlete improve? Did they improve on time? Last time they ran time X, is that now faster? If so, they've clearly made an improvement. One of the big things we're training for, as I touched on at the start, is that improved efficiency. They've got, or do they have a lower heart rate even though they ran a similar time? Have they decreased their power for a similar time for their time trial? And finally, what was the impact of weather or terrain? Now, example of Fritha's running here. Back in June, she ran 5Ks in 23:30. Last week, or started this week, it was 23:37. It's about the same, handful of seconds different, no big deal. Although it can be quite despondent looking at a time, think, oh, I've done all this training, but I've got 7 seconds slower. Now that 7 seconds could come from a headwind. The course used, if you're using the same measured course, for those in Wellington around the waterfront, there's a great measured course. If you're doing a regular park run, they're consistent from week to week on the course. Using an athletic track, it's precisely 5Ks starting at the 200-meter start and doing 12.5 laps to finish at the finish line. If you're out using a similar road, it might be a slightly different start point, a slightly different finish point. What has caused the 7 seconds difference? Who knows? Without getting wind data from both dates and times, we'll never know. But we can look at Fritha's data and look at her average heart rate. Back in June, it was 183. We're now 6 beats different below that. Having a look at the max heart rate, it was pretty much the same, slightly higher this time, but the average heart rate was still lower. The effort score for the workout back in June was 56. It's now 46. So there's a decrease there. And the intensity factor, 1.19 back in June, whereas now it's 107. So all up, the time trial result from this week for Fritha was a lot better. Let's have a look and dive into the details for this. So here's Fritha's detail here. And you can see heart rate just generally climbing. I'm not sure what happened here. I think that might have been a little bit of a transmission between the heart rate or the, I'm not sure if she's wearing a heart rate strap or whether it's a wrist-based one. I'm looking at that based on the fact that the pace was pretty consistent as well. Just an anomaly with the data transmission into the watch. And then if we look at this time round, we can see generally trending uphill again. Once again, all these small transmission issues. Now, with upgrades to the system, power is now being recorded as well. And so that was relatively stable with a few fluctuations. And we can probably tie them to intersections or something that happened out on the course. Elevation from 83 to 90. So it looks like there's steep climbs. It's not really changing much throughout the workout. See, didn't mean to scroll through into that. What have I done? Once again, we can look at that peak power output for Fritha. She held 236 watts over the 20 minutes, but the peak 1 minute was not that far ahead. So she was relatively stable with her effort. And we can see that with the power variability was 1.0, and the intensity factor was nice and close to 1 as well. 1.07 showing that she was pushing just above that threshold, whereas 1.19 intensity factor, she was pushing a lot higher than her threshold capability. This one indicates that Fritha was a lot more comfortable within the workout. Alrighty, as I mentioned, I'll touch a word about treadmill. Now, in terms of getting the data into Training Tilt or Training Peaks, the data is coming via the watch. But how is that speed data getting recorded? Are we measuring the movement of the watch? Are we measuring the speed of the belt on the treadmill? Or are we measuring speed from a foot pod? All three of those are possibilities depending on the settings you've got your watch set up for, or the how the treadmill is connected to the watch as well. So the data can look slightly different. Here is an example, and I don't know the answers because I haven't investigated them, but you can see the data is very looping in terms of the structure. This one here, it's still looping, but with a lot lower frequency, or sorry, a lot higher frequency, but smaller range. This one here, I suspect, is the belt speed of the treadmill, because the belt speed will adjust every time you put your foot on it. You're effectively applying a braking force to the belt on the treadmill. Every time that both feet are in the air, you're releasing that brake on the treadmill, and it manages to speed up. Foot lands on it, it slows down, it speeds up, slows down, speeds up as it works through that process. So in a nutshell, that is what I'm looking for, what I'm analyzing within the workouts for running workouts. Any questions? Just remember, you'll need to unmute yourself to ask the question. No one's jumping up with any questions. Hopefully that means I've covered everything thoroughly. So what I normally do at the end of these, give you the opportunity we go around the room and ask or cover off any questions that you might have in relation to other topics about your training. So this is an opportunity for the cyclists to jump in as well. No order is basically based on how you're listed on my screen in front of me. So Chloe, you're first up.
Holding up, I don't have any questions.
Sweet, that's nice and easy. I haven't had a look at your data from your training today.
Don't, please.
I'm not going to do it live, don't worry.
No, just don't do it at all.
Okay. I know you've been busy with some studies, so I'll leave it at that. Next up, Diane.
Yeah, I guess I'm just looking forward to getting back into it after 5 weeks of doing nothing. So yeah, definitely looking forward to starting again.
And just so no one thinks you're lazy, that's been a break forced by medical reasons. So yes, we'll track that and start when appropriate very soon.
Nice, absolutely. Thank you.
Next up, Gareth, who has also been taking a break from running for medical reasons.
I don't have any questions at this point. I'm pretty happy with my recovery so far, and looking forward to being able to run again. But I don't think that's going to be for, I would say, at least another 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So interesting to see some of my data come through here. And I found it very interesting hearing your analysis of it. So thank you for sharing tonight.
But you're welcome. Thanks for allowing us to use that data as well.
No problem. Trying to figure out how to mute myself, so if you can do it.
Consider it done. Tanya, kia ora.
Oh, kia ora. Yeah, I don't have any partai either. Any questions? I'm also not running at the moment. Seems to be a theme on this kōrero, but yeah. So, but I'm gonna try running next week. So I'm allowed to start running 2 minutes on, 5 minutes off. How lucky am I? So yeah, but very really interesting analysing all the stats. So yeah, ngā mihi, right? Thank you.
Sweet. And once again, I want to emphasize that Tanya's medical reason, none of these medical reasons are due to training errors. So the fat wood pigeon, Jamie, who has been running lately.
Not this week because I got gastro the day of my last event. So,
but you have been running. That's you've ran more in the last 2 weeks than Tanya, Diane, and Gareth have done accumulatively in the last, I'll say, 5 weeks.
Yeah. I suppose with me, it's just, so I've got my next 3 planned events. So there's the Y2K 25K quad extender. So it's a drop distance this year. So just not having a look at what that is. It's mountain bike trails followed by an up and down Mount Climby, because why not? Then I'll be, I think it's February, I've got my first attempt at a backyard ultra up at Riverhead. So, and then that one that I sent you today, I think it was, where I think I've accidentally said yes to doing an obstacle course race in March. And there was like, oh yeah, there's 3K, a 6K, and a 10K, or you can do all 3 of them in one hit, and I'm an idiot. So
I can guess which one you're doing then.
Yeah, with 90 plus exercises. So yeah, I need to continue trying to lose some beef and just work on my upper body. So
nice. Consistency.
Maybe look like a sprinter, basically, rather than a long distance runner.
Yep. Consistency of training is going to be the key.
Oh, calm down, mate.
As always.
Fucking madness, mate.
All right. Moving on to misconsistency. Jess.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing all of my things. I didn't think you were going to share so many, but that's all right. You did get me on the one that I didn't do so well on, though. I don't really have much to say except that running's been going pretty well going into the half marathon in under a month now. So I'm excited to see how much improvement that I have made, because the amount of pain I've been through, I hope there's some sort of improvement.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm confident based on your form at the moment. We just need to keep things rolling for the next 4 weeks. And I've got a couple of challenging sessions coming up for you before we taper off, and then unleash you over 21Ks.
How exciting.
Awesome. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
All right, Stu, who also hasn't been running of late or ever, because he's a cyclist, not a runner. I can see that you've unmuted yourself, Stu, but no sound is coming through.
What about now? Can you hear me?
That's good. Well, fire away.
Yeah, no, it takes a special sort of person to go running, which is not me. The cycling side of things is what I'm doing, but all my teammates seem to be pulling out on me at the last minute, and I've got to get ringing. So I think I'm the common denominator there. So
The thing is, you've got Super Sub, and we'll get to him a little bit later on.
Super Sub's going to have to pull the goods, I tell you.
Yeah.
But no, I think what is it? I don't know how long. Velocity, I think, is a really good training program. I think a lot of people. I found it interesting because with the running, how do you measure power with the running? I guess that's one thing of being not a runner. Because obviously, I got a power crank on the bike, and the wind trainer measures how much power. How do you actually measure power in running?
So there's a number of ways of doing it, but like there is with the bike, you measure it with pedals, cranks, hubs, smart trainers. There's a number of options there. With running, typically comes down to a foot pod on the shoe, although Garmin and Apple have both come up with a logarithm that can generate reasonably reliable numbers based on the watch and movement of the watch itself. But you can also get footbeds that go in shoes that measure power and stuff as well. I won't go into too much detail here because A, you're not a runner. And if anyone does want a lot more detail, I can send a link out to one of these that I did a few moons ago about running with power. So I'll share that to the group. Any other questions or comments there, Stu? Okay, moving on to Fritha.
Hi, can you hear me?
Absolutely, we can.
Well, thank you. That was timely, I think, considering my TT was just done last week, and I was a bit disheartened, if you could say that, just because and it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? 7 seconds. I mean, oh my goodness, but you're like, oh. So yeah, that was good that you looked at that data for me because yeah, I mean I worked out that my heart rate was a little bit more comfortable and lower, and so but yeah, it's just nice to have that just data to look at and yeah, see improvements even though the time was not improved, so yeah, so thank you for that, because it's kind of nice having that when you have those little moments of like, oh, what the hell am I doing this for?
That's right. We all have them.
So yeah, so no, that was helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Do you remember off the top of your head what the weather was like back in June compared to how it was at the start of the week?
It was fine. It was definitely fine. And it was a little bit, actually, funnily enough, it was a little bit, I remember I turned around. I just run on a road that's about 5K, but I do have to turn at some point and I remember in that one in June, I turned at one point. I can't remember which way it was. And I was like, oh my God, I'm turning again, because it was just like a little bit of a headwind, and that was at the end. And I was like, that was actually really hard. So this time there wasn't much wind at all for us, which is unusual because it's always windy. But I did go a little bit of a different track, like there's a little bit of a dip in there, so I don't know if that makes much difference. I definitely ran down that and up that to this week, whereas last time I did it maybe at the beginning. So
slightly different in the course as well.
Yeah.
I did want to draw attention to these emoji that you used afterwards to indicate. I think that's an indicator of how hard and how much effort you put in at the time, your thought process around that.
I definitely know that the February one that I did, and that was my first time trial, I wrote on my Strava, it was like 27 degrees. It was so hot. It's ridiculous. So but yeah, that's what it is.
Nice.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Sweet. No worries.
4 weeks on the countdown.
Yes.
Yep. Stay healthy is my plan.
Yes. Enjoy that wee break you've got coming up, or that mini training camp.
Yeah, that's what I'm calling it, a Fiji training camp. No, cool. Thank you.
Sweet. All right, and on to, I believe it's lucky last. I don't think there's anyone else left on my. I've got to scroll through my screen. A super sub, Jason.
No questions from me. Very informative though, and it sounds like I need a foot pod for my shoes.
Yeah. If anyone is interested in that power, I will put the link up into the VIP Facebook group. It's a few people that run with power, and Jamie might jump in with this and say how frustrating it can be and challenging to hit those zones. Has he unmuted himself? Way you go, Jamie.
It's a dick. To start with, it is an absolute dick. Trying to just get into that zone, unlike pace, where you can judge it a bit better if you're going a bit too hard or a bit too slow. The power one it's a different dynamic altogether. And then trying again, because often I'm in quite steep hills. I haven't been lately, but quite often I'll be in decent hills. So trying to get that on the long runs, get that power on the downhill without going at such a pace that I'm likely going to kill myself is a bit of a challenge. But obviously Ray sees that on the data that he gets. He knows I'm not just slacking off because my pace is quite high, but the power might be a bit lower. But he gets that. But it's totally worthwhile. I mean, I've been using that for about a year and a half, 2 years now, something like that, and it's definitely notice it. It comes as a surprise when I do get a pace run because I don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah, so if you've been training by pace, upgrading and changing to power has a number of benefits, particularly around judging your effort on variable terrain. Jess is a bit of an enigma. She's been training by power her entire running career. She hasn't had the time to get ingrained in the pace mindset. So she absolutely nails her power runs 9 times out of 10. Actually 99 times out of 100. So there's a bit of a learning that needs to occur. And I know Kelly, if she was on the call, she would be reinforcing what Jamie was saying as well. She gets very frustrated, along with a couple of other people, with trying to run at the power. And the other thing, power is a lot more variable as well. Your effort, small fluctuations get detected by power, whereas pace, those fluctuations don't show up in the data. So, yeah. All right. I've gone through everyone. If anyone does have any other questions, feel free to unmute yourself. It may be that something's popped up as a result of someone that's asked a question or made a comment after you. So feel free to jump in there. No one's jumping in. We will wrap things up. Thanks for joining us this evening. It's good to see such good numbers on the call. I've been, actually, it was before I went to Aussie, I think was the last time I did a group coaching call. So it was really great to see so many of you jump on board. Prior to then, the numbers were dwindling and only having 1 or 2. So thanks for all jumping in. In 2 weeks' time, I'll be looking to do a similar presentation about cycling data. There's a few differences with cycling. Power is a lot more prominent with cycling, and also a third platform. It's not just training peaks, training tilt, also velocity as well. Having said that, for those of you that are running or running for fitness, doesn't mean you should skip out on the session. The question and answer opportunity at the end will always be there as well. Any final questions before we wrap things up? All right, awesome. Thanks again. Appreciate you joining me. Have a fantastic week, and I'll look forward to not just catching up with you again soon, but seeing all that training data coming into the various platforms. Thank you.
Cheers, Ray.
Thanks, Ray.
Cheers, Ray. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you, Ray.
Thanks. Good night.
You're welcome.
Nice meeting everyone.
Ray, same to you.